So now let's talk about the essay brainstorming process. There is a method to the madness. Most people who start off writing a common app essay or a personal essay right off the bat without having really done some good homework and introspection process on it, they'll end up with a pretty messed up essay after a lot of work that they put in place. Okay, save yourself the trouble and please walk with me, see how I go through the process, and we'll talk, how this can be of benefit to you. Okay, so we'll talk about what are the different values. Like most students, if I ask them what values means, they will usually come back with saying honesty, hustler, or focus, dedicated, persistence. I'm like, what does that really mean? And they'll just draw a blank look. And then they'll ask me questions like, so what are all the values available? It's like, give me something I'll just pick from. I'm like, okay, so here are all the values. And they say, yeah, I'll pick this and this. I'm like, so what does this really mean to you? And the meaning itself is wrong for them because they have a different implication of that. So I wanted to put something together which said what are the different, like I've got about 24 values. Okay, like you got to fit in somewhere in those 24 values in like 2-3 of those. Okay, like maybe come down to first 10 and then come to 5 and then 3. But what's important is to look at some of the examples I provide there. And then really look at those examples, see how those relate to you, and then start putting together experiences which are showing me some of those values, not telling me that you are a disciplined person. Well, you're better off talking about how I woke up at 6 a.m. every day for the last 3 months to study for an exam. Okay, that shows more discipline than you telling me you're disciplined. We won't be covering the PIQ on-ramps here. I've already covered that in another place. So we'll talk the personal essay on-ramp, how you can take from your experiences onto the personal essay. Most important thing is that these essays are really your way to dream big. I mean, you might still think you have a fairly mediocre career in school because you're just grinding away. But if you take a step back and think about all the experiences and maybe look for some uniquenesses in your experiences, you will find the art of actually dreaming big. You will see that you can actually take risks and that you can make it, as you start dreaming big, you'll see how you can show up some of your vulnerabilities, and as you start putting those things together, you'll start seeing your application coming together. And don't take this just as an essay process. It's life skills that you're building from this whole thing. Okay, so just make it happen, and I can promise you'll have a lot of fun in the process with me. So these are some personal values, and your job is to look through these 12 and look at them at the face value on their names, what they mean. As you look at the explanations below them, try to understand or relate each bullet point, if possible, to an experience. And if there is an experience, just jot down a one-liner. So if you decided to write about curiosity or like creativity or bravery, okay, try to write 1 or 2 lines, just 1 or 2 lines, okay, just 3 words, 4 words are good, okay. Think in terms of what's called as a situational interview. If somebody asked you, about say fairness, okay, have you had a time when you felt you were getting biased in one area, and how did you turn it around, right? So you're expected to have answer in a situational format, explaining the situation, which is the background, what was at stake for which you were working, for which you had to stand up or do something. The T is the situation, then there is the task, which is the task at hand, the action you took or what you inspired in somebody, what was the result, of it. That's called the STAR format, STAR. And then what did you learn from it? That's the learning part of it. Okay. So think about that. These are the first 6 values. Again, try to go for like 3 values at a time. Think about those. If you can think of some stories about those, write them down somewhere. Go to the next 3, do the same thing. So take some time. If you miss something here, it's okay to miss 1 or 2 small things here and there, but big misses, you will pay for it down the line in your application. So this is literally the way these vignettes, these small dossier stories are the basics of your essays. Okay, so think of these values, think what it reminds you. Does it make you feel good? Maybe in another place for those values, write about what it reminded you. Maybe it reminds you of some pudding that your mom was making that same day. So maybe write that down somewhere as well, because that kind of that additional factors on top, those become very interesting when you're writing your personal essay. Okay? Not for UC essays, not for supplemental essays. Those are fairly core, straight to the point. But the fancy one is your personal essay, the Common App main essay or Coalition App main essay. Okay? Go through the same for these, another 6, another, go through this process, think it through. These are your values. Okay, I'm not asking you to look at essay questions as yet, not there yet. Okay, just thinking in terms of very, very high level. You're just flirting with what's coming next, which is experiences, where you'll be asked to actually write things down in a more formal manner. Okay, a little more formal. Okay, this is how we write stories. This is where you are given my document for experiences, about 20 experiences dark questions, each like 5 or 6 of them per area, and initiative, intellectual curiosity, contribution, diversity of experience, and drive. Those are the 5 areas that a college will typically measure your personality around. That's where they measure how you work. That's how they gauge you as a person. In fact, the UCs will, if you look at the proof in the pudding, these are your 5 initiatives: contributions, intellectual curiosity, initiatives, diversity of experience, and drive. If you look at the UC's personal insight questions, you can see how those directly map to those experiences which we talked about. So we went from putting together personal values, kind of thinking about values really associate with me, to answering a bunch of questions like 2 each on each of these 5 areas, which in some ways also connected to your values, the stories you found in your values. We just were formalizing them a little more, still not in the essay format. And then you connect them to your PIQs, the UC essays, which are kind of in some ways also like the supplementary questions that the Common App has. So you use these to make supplementaries, and you use them also to make your PIQs. And then you use the same ideas, or you use everything that you learned, and you literally go through the Men in Black's, syndrome, where they erase all your memory, and you start over again. You have with you your PIQs that you've written, okay? And now you start writing a personal statement essay. And the personal, the values that are important to you. You've already written about something about them. Now you're starting to see some thematic, something important that connects a lot of those themes, or you literally reverse engineer, go back to those questions. What do those questions mean to you? What values of your personality? Like if one of them was on volunteering and one was about an extracurricular, there have to be some connections with each of them, or things that they open up into about values or about people or how you feel that comes out. We go through that process like on a Miro diagram, and we come up with ultimately with something which is which helps you literally formulate this as a personal statement. But to get here, you literally have to imagine this is your Berkeley, your UC PIQs. In brainstorming, where it's a large idea, Okay, so like maybe you wrote about playing soccer in your supplementals or your PIQs. Look at these, which are what we call as tiny seed ideas. These are what happened in these sports, in these things. These are the essence. This is the sentiments associated with these larger ideas. That is what the framework that the personal essay belongs to. Okay. So remember that, and if you are able to think in that style, build your essay starting from your where we started from your personal values to connecting it to the traits, writing on some of those questions for those traits, connecting them to the PIQs, formalizing the essays and answers, and then finally going to the connecting all those, like reverse engineering the PIQs, finding the themes that connect them, making them, going through a little more of a brainstorming exercise to find the sentiment, and then actually putting up with a personal statement. And it works out just fine. I've seen enough students making it work. You won't be any different. Okay. These are your Common App prompts for 2022, and haven't changed a whole lot at all actually from last year. Number 4 was changed in 2021, so that's a new prompt. So I'm putting it in green. Number 5 tends to get used the most, and I find it actually the most boring. Number 7, I actually ask my students really to stay away from it. That is a bad choice. I mean, fundamentally, if you could not even use any of these 6 to come up with an answer, and if your answer, what you wrote over here was something similar to this question, you're going to be in trouble. I mean, nobody enjoys reading stuff where you feel like you've just been cut and paste from somewhere else. You wrote something and you didn't really put the effort to make it yours. So design your own prompt. I'm completely against it. Then we'll talk about supplemental essays, these are the things which are kind of similar to the PIQs, but they tend to go a step further. For example, create your own class essay, where you're designing your own class. You've been told, if you could design a class, what would you teach and who would you make it as your students and what would be the outcome, maybe put together a curriculum. That requires a lot of creativity. Majors or the field of study essay, easy. That's not hard, because if you've decided a major extracurricular essay, most of people have it. You can replicate a PIQ to give it. School specific is typically based on the school's values. What the school's values are, how do you apply to some of those? Maybe you write something about an interview you had with the alumni or with the AdCom or with the professor. Remember things I was talking earlier, how you can show demonstrated interest. That's kind of what you just supplemental for school specific is. And then there is a quirky essay, which is could be very weird stuff like, who was that? Carnegie Mellon had like 2 years ago, why did the chicken cross the road? Or why did the woodpecker do some things? How much wood did the woodpecker take out of the tree or something? Some weird questions, but ultimately they get into the same thing. They are trying to see how creative can you get with an answer, how realistic can you still stay with an answer. It's just an interesting way of doing things. So that ends this session, and which was about explaining to you what are the different types, how do we go about the process, what are the different essays. And now in the next section, we'll talk about do's and don'ts.